Hello there. I want to welcome you to the Manifestation Podcast. This is a very special episode. And during this episode, I'm going to give you the behind the scenes story of how my 19th book called Savvy Wisdom, and Savvy is spelled S-A-V, V as in Victor, S-A-V-Y, Wisdom, how this book came to be. And I'm going to share this story with you in a way that will teach you some very valuable lessons, because the experience of writing Savvy Wisdom definitely reminded me of some very valuable lessons as well. So Savvy Wisdom is a rather unique book. Savvy Wisdom is not written like my previous 18 books. Savvy Wisdom is written as a novel, as a parable, in fact. So it's a story, and it's a story that has many valuable lessons as a part of it. So how did this book come to be? Well, it started on October the 30th. I was looking at a list, and it is a list of recommended video topics that my team had put together, suggesting that I create some videos to share with the world. And we do a lot of things in my business in Dynamic Destinies where we share content, do special webinars, do video series. We post things on our YouTube channel. Of course, we do the podcast. We do a lot of things that are all designed around constantly giving, sharing, and helping people in only positive ways. So on the 30th of October, I look at my list and I see that the next topic that's in line is a topic that says something like how I wrote my first fiction book. Now, I am a woman of integrity, and I don't say things that aren't true. I don't teach things that I'm not aware of, and I don't declare that I've accomplished things that I've never accomplished. So when I looked at the list and I saw that the next video to be created was a video on how I wrote my first fiction book, the first thought I had was to go to the next item on the list and to simply delete that as an item on the list. But I paused for a moment because I had this thought, what if I could write a fiction book? What if I did write a fiction book? So what did I do in that moment? I decided to get out of my own way and decided to play a little bit further with an idea. And this is part of a 7-step process that I share with people when I'm teaching, either in my master's manifesting event or in other types of webinars. I talk about the process of things that manifest into physical form. And part of that process is, when you get an idea, do you dismiss it or do you entertain it? And so when this idea popped into my consciousness of writing a fiction book, I decided that I would entertain it and play with the idea. And that's exactly what I did. So then I began to imagine, well, what would that look like? What would it look like to have written a fiction book? And then another thought came to my mind. Well, you could hire a ghostwriter. You could hire someone that's really effective at writing, someone who's trained to be a writer, because in the past, I have often said that you don't have to be a great writer to write a great book, because the world has editors and ghostwriters, and they can help your work become great. I've worked with so many authors around the world where English wasn't their first language, and yet they produced phenomenal books in English because they took my guidance and advice, and they either hired a ghostwriter or just found a great editor. And so the thought came into my consciousness, maybe I should hire a ghostwriter. But then immediately following that thought was a feeling. And the feeling was, I want to write this book. But even though I've said in the past, and I've been on stages all over the world declaring that even though I'm an author of many, many books, I wouldn't consider myself a great writer. And then I thought, well, Peggy, how is that belief serving you? Well, it's certainly not. And a couple of years ago, I was studying one of Neville Goddard's books. And in this particular book, there was a section where it was open Q&A. So it was transcribed from an event that Neville Goddard had done live. And someone had asked Neville Goddard this question. The question was, if I believe that I'm a great writer, could I be a great writer? And Neville's answer was yes. And he elaborated on that and he said, quite often great writers are also great readers. So then a quote came into my mind, a quote by William James, who is a phenomenal philosopher, was a phenomenal philosopher. And William James said the following. He said, believe and your belief will create the fact. So I stopped myself in that moment and I started thinking from a place of, what if I believed that not only could I write a great book, but that I have the ability right now to do so? And so I decided I'm going to believe that I'm going to write a great book. And I made a decision to forge forward. And I decided I'm going to write a novel that's based on wisdom that I've acquired over the 40 plus years of studying intensely personal development and succeeding in many, many areas, every area of my life. And so I decided I'm going to write a book in a style that I personally love. What's that style? Parable style. A parable. And a parable is a story that has valuable lessons in it. And that's where the idea came from to write the book. When I started writing, I did not know what the book would be called. I didn't know what the characters would be called, but I decided to follow my own advice and live from the end and dwell in the end, meaning I'm going to imagine that it's already written and that it's a phenomenal page turner that people love and want to share with others. So that's where I began to imagine. Now, I also did something that I recommend other people do, and I decided to hook up with a very, very close friend of mine who's an extremely talented fiction writer, who actually is someone that I recommend as a mentor for fiction writers. And I asked her, I said, would you be willing to give me feedback as I write each chapter? So if I write chapter 1 and I send it to you, can you give me some feedback? Because initially, I could still feel my paradigms playing a role in what I was doing. And I had this thought, if I produce garbage with my first version or my first chapter of the book, then maybe I could just give up on the whole project and just cancel it before I go too far. So I asked my friend, Louise, to be my accountability partner. And I told her that I would be sending her chapter by chapter and I would love her feedback. Now, I've also been teaching authors for many, many years. I teach nonfiction authors and I teach fiction authors. So I have written and released 19 or 18 nonfiction books. I've never written a fiction book, but I've studied fiction writing and I teach fiction writing as well as nonfiction writing. So I knew enough that I had a good basis to work from and decided to get on with the work. So essentially what I did was I removed any blocks, which are limited thinking, which are beliefs that don't help you. I decided to remove them from the process so that I would actually create something phenomenal. And what were those blocks? Blocks that I couldn't do it, blocks that I wasn't a great writer, and blocks that it was going to be a garbage end product. So I thought none of those beliefs are going to help me or support me and certainly won't propel me to get to where I want to go. So I decided to get rid of them. Now, when you remove blocks, it's important to replace them. What do you replace the paradigms with or the belief systems with? You replace them with something that's more empowering, something that puts you into harmony with the outcome that you desire. So I decided that not only was I going to write a great book, but I was able to write a great book and that it was a phenomenal end product. So I decided to create those beliefs and hang on to those beliefs. So on October 30th, I made a very firm decision. I'm going to write my first fiction book and I'm going to get it done in 10 days. Now, I teach my authors, set deadlines. Now, you may set deadlines that you have no idea how you're going to accomplish. I remember setting a deadline to write a book in a weekend, and I didn't think it could be done at the time, but I decided I'm going to give it a try. And you know what? I did it. Now, I have a fairly busy schedule. I have a lot of client appointments. I have teaching calls. I have creative time, development work, study time. I work with private mentoring clients. So I have a really busy schedule. So at the time that I decided to write this book, My schedule is pretty darn packed, but that was okay because I slotted off and blocked off time in my agenda where I would write. And I blocked off time early morning. And if there was a space in my agenda, maybe in the middle of the day, or if I finished working and I felt like writing, I would write. So I decided I would write the book. Well, the whole title, the idea, the concept came to me as I was involved and as I was in the spirit of writing the book. And so Savvy Wisdom, the name of the book, came to me after I started writing. And Savvy, who is one of the main characters in the book, is a name that came to me as I was writing as well. Now, I've had many people say to me, when they've seen the title, are you spelling it correctly? Savvy, isn't it S-A-V-V-Y, like the word, someone who has savvy, who is savvy? No, Savvy is S-A-V-Y, and it's a name. And Savvy is a character that I based on Bob Proctor. Bob Proctor has been my mentor and my friend for many years. I started a study with Bob Proctor 42 years ago. So more than 40 years ago. Bob has taught me a lot of wisdom. So in the book, Savvy Wisdom, you'll meet a character by the name of Sophie. That's me. And the book starts where Sophie is at a point in her life where she has no will to live. She literally wants to end her life. And that's where I was before I met the Bob Proctor. Now, I won't give away any more of the book, but you'll definitely want to read it. And so what happened was I set my deadline 10 days. And I got on with the work. Now, I wasn't sure exactly how the book was going to end, but I knew this. The book was going to end with a letter from Savvy to Sophie. And at one point I was thinking, maybe I might get someone else to write the letter, like maybe one of my team members. But then I thought, no. So I wrote and wrote and wrote. And 9 days later, I was finished my part. What wasn't finished was the final letter. And on the 10th day, I woke up in the morning and it just occurred to me, an idea came into my consciousness to ask Bob Proctor to write the final letter in the book. Well, Bob would obviously have to read the book first. And I know Bob is an extremely busy man. And so I thought, well, you know what? Spirit is guiding me. That's what my intuition is saying. My intuition is saying, ask Bob. And so I emailed Bob and I said, Bob, here's what's happened. I told him, where it came from. And I said, I've attached the rough draft manuscript to this email. And if you feel inclined that you would love to write that final letter from Savvy to Sophie, please let me know. Well, what I didn't know is that Bob had checked into a resort and he went there to create and complete a program, a phenomenal program that he's working on. And obviously he was busy. He was working day and night. And so when he received my emails around 10:32 in the morning, and he responded around 10:34 in the morning saying, absolutely, I would love to. You see, Bob also makes decisions based on intuition. And there was something about my email, something about that message, even though he hadn't read the book yet, that felt like he should do it and that he's going to love doing it. So he said, absolutely, I would love to. Thank you for inviting me. I mean, I was blown away when I got his response, happily, of course. So Gina, who's been working with Bob for well over 30 years, who's a lovely person, Gina Hayden, she printed the book for Bob and gave him a copy. So when he got back to his suite that evening, which was 9 o'clock, he said that he picked it up and started to read. He fell asleep. He'd been going all day long, fell asleep, woke up at midnight, and found himself thinking about Savvy Wisdom. So he started reading it again, read for 2 more hours, fell asleep, got up at 6 and finished it. And then the text began where he started sending me messages saying, I love this book. And he does love this book. He has such strong feelings about this book. He really feels it's going to be huge in the world. I feel it too. This book literally came to and through me. And so audible.com has bought the rights to the audio version of the book. And Bob and I, on December 19th, 2020, which is my birthday, we were at his studio recording the audio version of the book. And he has been raving about it to so many people. And I created some proof copies. I've had a few copies go out, and the responses have been unlike anything I've ever received before. Now, first of all, Bob is in love with the book, in love with it completely. He suggested that I produce the book in hardcover because he said it's a classic. And he suggested the original version of the cover that I change. And so I followed through. He also suggested that I add these words to the front cover: Savvy Wisdom, it has the power to change your life. And it really does. It's already changing people's lives. Phil Goldfine, who is an Academy Award-winning Hollywood producer, said, "What I love most about Savvy Wisdom is that when I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. I look forward to adapting this book into a screenplay. It's really great." Well, right now, there are 3 screenwriters that are working on the screenplay for Savvy Wisdom. One is creating it to be a motion picture. Another one is for a feature film, and another one is for a series as well. Now, I've also bought the license plate Savvy Wisdom, which will be going on my car once it's received. But so many other people, like my friends or some of my clients that have had an advanced copy of the book and have read it, have been sharing phenomenal results. Ariel Ford, a good friend of mine I met many years ago, said, "Savvy Wisdom is a delightful contemporary parable filled with deep wisdom for all ages. This beautiful, engaging story of a teenage girl and a stranger who becomes her mentor offers inspiration, magic, and the secret to success. Highly recommended." I had a neighbor send me a text. I gave her an advanced proof copy, and she sent me a text saying, "I read it. I love it. I want copies for my granddaughters who are both teenagers. I want a copy for my daughter, and I want to give 2 more copies to my friends." I have another client who read Savvy Wisdom, and she said that she won't work with clients unless they read Savvy Wisdom as well. So, what are the lessons in this? You want to pay attention to when you get inspired with new ideas. You want to get out of your own way. You want to stop allowing limiting beliefs to hold you back. You want to do something that you've never done before. Because what happens is a number of things. Now, for Savvy Wisdom, I believe this is going to go on and change millions of people's lives, but it's changed my life too. And even though I've been studying personal development for 40 years, I'm always on the side of growth, expansion, creating a greater and grander version of who I am. How do I do that? By studying, by understanding, and by applying. And I suggest you do the same. So if you're inspired by Savvy Wisdom, or you're inspired by this example in this story, I suggest you check out savvywisdom.com. We put together a very special offer for the launch of this book. And if you have a desire to be a successful author, then I also invite you to check out thecompleteauthorprogram.com, thecompleteauthorprogram.com. But I would really love for you to accomplish your dreams and your desires too. Now, get yourself a copy of Savvy Wisdom. I absolutely recommend it. We have it available in hardcover and in Kindle version, and you'll find it on Amazon.com and many sites around the world. So, and if you love our podcast and you love this particular story and you'd love to share it with others, please do, because we're here to serve you in every positive way that we possibly can. So that's a wrap for today's podcast. I want to thank you for listening. Leave us a 5-star review as well if you like it or love it. And I look forward to seeing you again in another session. So head over now to savvywisdom.com.